Hello again, everyone. Welcome to this edition of Midwest Ag This Week. I'm Stu Ellis. I take care of the farm chores here at WCIA 3. In the next few minutes, you'll get some insight and guidance on fertilizer. Hear what the big partnership's all about between Growmark and CHS. You'll hear about ways of reducing the impact of tar spot in your corn, preparing your tires on farm equipment for the winter, reconciling your account with the First National Bank of Nitrogen, and we'll find out a lot more. All of that beginning right now.
Welcome to Midwest Ag This Week with host Stu Ellis.
Well, Josh Linville of StoneX, formerly FC Stone, may be the most quoted authority today about fertilizer prices. And even though all fertilizer prices are exploding upward, he says there's something different pushing prices for each type of fertilizer.
Unfortunately, each one, nitrogen, phosphate, potash, all three of them have their own worst case scenario on the upside. Nitrogen, when you look around the world, China has shut down exports. European natural gas continues to remain sky high, which means their production is way down. Russia output caps are put into place. Egypt is doing the same thing. If demand continues to come in Q1 as we expect it to, there's still plenty of upside. Not to mention the U.S., this is going to sound weird, but we are actually cheap versus the rest of the world right now. So once we start to move in line to call in those imports, we can see our prices go up significantly. Phosphate, we are chewing through through our inventories right now. And Bangladesh actually just finished a purchase tender. Their lowest price offered, $975 a ton. China is the first or second exporter in terms of volume on phosphate, and they've shut that down through June. Other places are still very, very low. There's been all sorts of reports and stories coming out of India about how low their stockpiles are compared to normal. We are in a very low inventory, high demand period, and prices are starting to reflect that. And we are not going to be immune to that. We could see our prices go right up with them. And then potash, if you've been watching the news with Belarus and Russia, those two alone account for 35% of the world operating capacity for potash. So if those two do get into a war and all of a sudden, let's say potash exports just stop, we've just lost 35 million ton a year of operating capacity.
Should you bite the bullet and buy now, or can you wait until spring?
Number one, take emotion out of your decision making. I know a lot of people are upset about where prices are. I know a lot of people are angry about where fertilizer prices are, and chemical and seed and everything else. It seems like every time grain prices go up, so does every other input. They want more of their money. But try to keep it as much of a level head as possible. Leave emotion out of the decision making. But at the other point, in conjunction with that, also make sure you're looking at the decision for you. What works as far as yes, buy it, or no, buy it, may be right for you, but it may not be right for the farmer next to you, for the county next to you, for the state next to you.
So you've got to make some tough decisions. Two of the largest farm cooperatives, Growmark and CHS, have created a joint venture to create more innovation in agriculture for application on your farm. Heather Thompson of Growmark says FS member companies are going to be the link to farmers to those new technologies.
The joint venture with CHS, which we're calling Cooperative Ventures, really will allow us to accelerate that innovation that we're able to bring to the ag industry and to our member owners.
Innovation in regards to what? Could you give me an example or two?
Absolutely. So the fund will be focused on three key areas of innovation, the first of which is crop production. So we're talking about new ideas and innovations in fertilizer and crop protection products. We're talking about precision ag technology, and we're talking about new products altogether and categories like biologicals. The second area is supply chain innovation. So we've certainly seen in the last 2 years how our supply chain has been impacted by recent events. But even before that, logistics and distribution has been a big part of our business, and we know that that's what helps our members be more successful. So we're looking for technologies and innovations that can help with those supply chain constraints and concerns. And then the final area for us that we're interested in is sustainability. So specifically, how do we help farmers be more sustainable on their operations and capitalize on new ideas and trends within the sustainability space, including carbon capture, greenhouse gas emissions and markets, that kind of thing.
How do some of the innovations that you might develop from this how do they float down to farmers in the field?
We think when you think about a startup organization, they're developing these technologies and innovations, but they very likely don't have a direct connection to the farm gate to test those technologies. Because of our vast member network and the farmers who do business with us, I mean, we serve over 200,000 farmers across millions of acres. So if we can make connections between those startups that have new ideas and want to test them and the farmers who are hungry for those new technologies and will be able to help them on their operations, we think that's just a really beautiful connection in the space that we can help get that technology to the farmer sooner and be more successful.
Fascinating. Maybe some of the new technology will help control the weather.
Hey, one day.
Wouldn't that be something?
I think there'd be some millionaires in the weather team if that would be the case.
Appreciate Jacob for being in here today. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, for the holiday weekend, I'm sure farmers are wrapping up things, if not done, for the most part. Seems like statistically,
harvest is about done statistically.
A few spots maybe have some muddy areas still from some of that rain and isolated spots like that. The good news now, the focus now turns towards putting nitrogen in the ground, that application of anhydrous and whatnot. Looking pretty good overall.
Good.
We don't want a lot of rain because that can lead some of that out.
That's another problem.
Yeah, that's another problem. So we've got a little bit here as the forecast as we look at future track for the weekend here. Very light amounts here. We're not talking about any gully washers or anything like that. We roll into the week ahead to overall with a cold northwest wind winning out in the area. That's going to keep us pretty dry, we think here. You can sometimes get these quick little clipper systems, but that does not produce enough moisture for the region here. And maybe we get another little system that slides by sometime Wednesday into Thursday. But the big key is minor amounts of rain, if that. And so that's the good news here. We're not looking like the big rains we had during the summer by any stretch of the imagination. Over the next 7 days and a little beyond, we're less than a quarter of inch average area-wide. A lot of spots are going to be less than that, which is good news here as we look at the precipitation forecast over the next 7 days. As we check the extended outlook, the 8 to 14-day outlook, this comes from the guys down in Oklahoma. It looks near normal. There's some indications of drier than normal to our south and west, but that overall suggests a pretty standard pattern as we head into the December here, rounding out November, and we start to think snow is something that maybe happens here. So we'll see what happens, but overall we really think that things are looking pretty quiet and dry for the forecast here across the region. Want to mention too, soil temperatures. Of course, that's really key right now. That 50 number, a lot of folks are watching for that. We're in the low to middle 40s here at some of our observation sites. Champaign soil temperature, 4-inch bare soil temp at 42 degrees. It's 46 in Olney, Peoria at 43, Springfield at 45, Stell is at 40. It would take a lot to warm that back up to 50 here, so I think we're in the prime time for some of those applications. Of course, we'll be watching, keeping updated on that, and that's something that we're going to watch, Stu, that the farmers finish out the work for the year over the next couple of weeks.
That's right. We still got some field work to do, and we've got some work on tar spot to do, and we'll talk about that right after this.
Welcome back to Midwest Ag This Week.
Well, if you had tar spot in your corn this year, you'll have it again next year, and it could diminish your yield again. But how can you mitigate that problem? John Skinner with Beck's Hybrids says there are several things you can do, but you won't find any hybrids that are resistant to tar spot.
Right now, we're not using the term resistance. We're using susceptible or tolerance. In the genetics we have right now, with the maturities we deal with, there's no known resistance to it in the genetic lineup. So we're evaluating our products as they come to market. We're looking at the susceptibility of certain products and giving them rankings. So when our customers come to us and ask what the best hybrid to combat tar spot is, we have multiple locations, multiple years worth of data to help them with that.
So to fight it, really, that puts all the weight on the shoulders of fungicides.
Currently, right now, fungicide is pulling a lot of the weight to combat tar spot, but there's other things we can look at. We can look at nutrient availability. We can look at overall plant health through supplying adequate nutrients, nitrogen, potassium, phosphorus to those plants, and making sure we have a healthy foundation to start with, because adequate nutrients is going to increase your plant health and hopefully reduce the susceptibility of those products to tar spot.
Okay. And as far as application of fungicides, you hear about hitting it at tassel time and a little bit after. Is that still what your recommendation is?
For the most part, yes. My recommendation is to hit it at that VTR1 time frame. Over time, through our research at our practical farm research sites, we found that provides us with the highest ROI, as well as the lowest incident ratings for diseases. Now, with the injection of tar spot and southern rust coming in later, we're starting to do some studies to see how late that application can still be profitable. Some early results this year are showing all the way out to the R4 growth stage that we're still seeing positive yield and a positive return on investment by applying a fungicide when those diseases are present.
So if you've got tar spot this last year, you'll have it again next year. Don't look for a resistant hybrid. The United Soybean Board, which manages the soybean checkoff, has been led in the past year by a reserved and unassuming farmer from Morton. He's going to soon turn over his chairman's gavel and his leadership.
Congratulations on a fabulous year in leading the United Soybean Board.
It's been a pleasure. I've totally enjoyed it.
This is Dan Farney. Dan is a small-town Tazewell County farmer who has risen to the top of the checkoff industry for soybeans, and soybeans have really benefited in the last year, and a lot of that, I think, can be attributed to Dan Farney.
Oh, no, I don't know about that. I've got a board of 78 people that are worked very hard, and they do a lot of the work.
They do. Tell me some of the things that you're most proud of that's happened in the last year.
So probably soybean prices have come up. I would say, I don't know that I've had a big, impact on that, but that makes us all smile a little bit more. But probably as far as USB, we're working hard to get information out to our approximately 515,000 different soybean farmers. And one of the new ways we're doing that is through the soybean hopper, they call it. And it's kind of a digital media website and email outreach, and just trying to get the message out to our farmers how their checkoff is being used.
If you had the opportunity, would you do it again?
Absolutely. And I would encourage anybody that has the time to get started. And you just put in time, you learn how to work with people, you learn to be involved with people across the nation, soybean farmers from all the different states, and it's friendships that'll last a lifetime.
And our congratulations again to Dan Farney, who is retiring chairman of the United Soybean Board.
And of course, the United Soybean Board has certainly been a great supporter of biodiesel. And what a lot of people don't realize is that soybeans right now are being crushed for their oil content. That normally doesn't happen. It's usually crushed for the protein content. And biodiesel is something that's really become a major powerhouse in biofuels. I ran into an old friend this last week who was one of the very first people who was a soy diesel promoter.
His name is Kenlon Johannes, and he was executive director of the Missouri Soybean Association when soybean oil-based renewable diesel got its start.
Where did you run with it to the point that we were using 3 billion gallons a year now?
Well, Stu, I think people don't realize that you were somewhat instrumental in the beginning of the biodiesel industry in the United States back in 1991 when you and I met in my office, or the Missouri Soybean Association's office in Jefferson City, Missouri, and dropped off a paper that University of Columbia had done, or University of Missouri Columbia had done on developing biodiesel from canola and getting a new crop of canola in the United States. And it perturbed me a bit. I appreciate you didn't perturb me, but that the University of Missouri was looking into this, because soybean oil was 10 cents a pound at that time. We were floating in soybean oil. So you dropping off that paper got me excited and made me approach our checkoff board in Missouri to look into how we might develop this.
And it kind of went from there, and the industry adopted it, the nations adopted it, and it's become one of those market development stars.
The farmers led the way. The farmers provided all the funding early on, almost all the funding, right from the start for the first 10 years, and just kept working away at it until we had this instant success now that is up to 3 billion gallons a year, which is just, I don't even know if we even thought it would do that. It's just kind of overwhelming to think about it now.
What did you do to incite that interest in farmers?
Well, you know, it's kind of a combination of persistence, really vision, and naivety. That we thought we could take away 10% of petroleum industry's markets in the United States. You know, it was just a matter, it appeared to be the right thing to do.
And that's how biodiesel got started.
Coming up, we're going to check your tires. In our Shop Talk session today, we visited with Brad Harris of Firestone Tires about preparing them for the winter.
As we're getting ready to put equipment away for the winter, I encourage customers to use this time to quickly look over the tires. Let's inspect them for any cuts, tears, overworn tires before we put them away, just so that we can start going into the planning season with thinking, do I need new tires for my tractor? Do I need new tires for my implements? Before we put it away for cold storage, I encourage customers to inflate those tires up to the max rated capacity, inflation pressure of that tire. So as we put it away, it sits in that shop or into the cold storage all winter. A tire is going to naturally lose air, and we don't want customers to come out into the shop in March and go to pull a field cultivator or a planter out and see that we've got a flat tire. Just some of those little preventative maintenance things to make things a little bit easier in the spring as we're pulling things in and out of the shops and cold storage.
Any sort of dressing for a tire?
Not really. I encourage customers just if we've got a lot of mud on the tires, if we got into a wetter harvest season, let's go ahead and just power wash the mud off of there just so it's not sitting on the tire all winter long. I don't encourage customers to put any kind of silicone or cleaners on the tires. Sometimes those have a petroleum-based product that will actually take some of the ozone protection out of the tire and shorten its life a little bit. So I just take water, a little bit of soap, wash them off, and then put them away.
What about tracks?
With tracks, we're going to do the same thing with tracks as with tires. We're going to inspect them before we put them away, make sure we're not seeing those steel body cords that are in there that gives that tracks its structural integrity. Again, with track system, it's even more important to get any mud, dirt out of those undercarriage units so that when we get into a cold freeze that mud doesn't expand and cause damage to the bogie wheels or stretch that track out, which could cause slippage in the planting season when we're going to use it. Start taking inventory today of what tires we may need as we go into 2022 planting season. With some of the supply crunches that are out there, tire inventories are low right now.
Coming up, a little bit more on nitrogen. You put nitrogen on, sometimes it is sucked up to the plant, sometimes it goes away. Nitrogen specialist Lowell Gentry at the College of Aces has several surprises in terms of when and why nitrates flow out of field tiles.
Soybean is a net depleter of soil N, but why do we have this release of nitrogen after soybean? And it's because we think there's a difference in net mineralization following soybean versus corn because of the difference in the quantity of residue and the quality of residue. And corn residue is 2.5 to 3 times more than is soybean residue, just on a quantity basis, but it's low in N. It has a wider C to N ratio. So there's greater immobilization potential following corn than following soybean. So really what I'm getting at now is it's the rotation effect. It's not really an N credit, it's just the effect of the previous crop. And so there's a difference in net mineralization following soybean than following corn. And like I said, that nitrate can be released and get into the tile. And I think at this other experiment we have in Piatt County where we've moved to a corn, soybean, wheat rotation. Wheat then occupies the space of a cover crop and grabs that mineralized N that forms after soybean. And it makes sense that that's what we used to do, a corn, soybean, wheat rotation. Now that farm in Piatt County is far enough south where he's double cropping soybean after his wheat, and that has held up his profitability compared to conventional corn, soybean, and paid for all the cover cropping and the other expense of planting 2 crops in 1 year, for example. But that old soybean N credit, that's not part of the MRT anymore. That is it's already taken into the algorithm of well, what was the N rate response when corn was the previous crop, or what's the N rate response when soybean was the previous crop. So all that's taken into consideration in the MRTN, and we don't actually then factor in a soybean N credit anymore. Like we used to subtract 40 pounds from our what would be a continuous corn fertilization rate and give that a credit to the soybean. It's really a rotational effect, and I think we're understanding it more and more. So it's interesting that it doesn't seem to have anything to do with how much fertilizer we put on the corn the year before. It's really about just the net mineralization that occurs after soybean, and it's possible that you have even more mineralization after a very large soybean.
Thanks for watching today. Well, join us again next weekend. And thanks to all the farmers who contributed to your Thanksgiving meal. I'm Stu Ellis.